The lingering scent of stale coffee and forgotten dreams often permeated Detective Miles Corbin's small, cluttered office at the Boston Police Department. At 42, Miles was a homicide detective known for his unyielding dedication to cold cases, a quiet obsession that masked a personal tragedy that had etched itself onto the very fabric of his being. His days blurred into long nights, spent hunched over dusty files, the glow of his desk lamp illuminating decades of unresolved sorrow. The quiet solitude of his downtown Boston apartment, nestled among the historic brick buildings, mirrored the isolated nature of his work. It was a life lived in the shadows of the past, chasing ghosts that refused to rest. His dinner ritual was a testament to his isolation. It was almost always takeout, a greasy slice of pizza or a lukewarm container of Chinese food, consumed without ceremony while reviewing case files spread haphazardly across his kitchen table. The silence in his apartment was profound, broken only by the rustle of papers or the occasional distant siren wailing through the city streets. Every surface seemed to hold the silent ghosts of unresolved cases, their unsolved mysteries a constant, gnawing reminder of professional failures and personal losses. Photographs of victims, their faces frozen in time, were pinned to a corkboard above his desk, a grim gallery of those whose stories he was still fighting to tell. He avoided social gatherings, the forced pleasantries of small talk feeling hollow and meaningless. He preferred the silent, demanding company of cold leads, each fragment of information a whisper from the past he meticulously chased. One particularly blustery morning, the kind that whipped the salty air off Boston Harbor, Miles found himself caught in the chaotic rush of the MBTA subway. The platform at South Station was a swirling vortex of hurried commuters, loud announcements, and the metallic screech of an arriving train. Amidst the blur of faces, a scene unfolded that, for a moment, cut through Miles's detached professional shell. A young woman, clearly overwhelmed, struggled desperately with a broken stroller. Its wheel had buckled, leaving her stranded. A crying toddler clinging to her leg, his wails echoing through the crowded platform. Her face was etched with exhaustion and frustration, tears starting to well in her eyes as impatient commuters brushed past her. Despite his usual stoic demeanor and the urgency of his own commute to a morning briefing, Miles instinctively stepped out of the flow of foot traffic. He paused, observing the raw vulnerability in her posture. Without a word, he knelt beside the broken stroller. His hands, usually accustomed to sifting through evidence or gripping a firearm, moved with a surprising gentleness. He quickly assessed the damage, then with a firm but careful twist, he managed to pop the bent wheel back into its socket. The stroller, though still wobbly, was functional again. As he straightened, he looked at the toddler, whose cries had softened to sniffles. Miles offered a brief, reassuring smile, a flicker of warmth in his usually guarded eyes. "There you go, little guy," he murmured, his voice surprisingly soft. The mother, her eyes wide with surprise and profound gratitude, could only mouth a silent, "Thank you." Miles simply nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity, and melted back into the flow of commuters. It was a small act, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of his day, but it revealed an underlying humanity, a genuine empathy that often lay hidden beneath layers of disillusionment and professional detachment. It was a reminder that, beneath the hardened exterior, Miles Corbin was still fundamentally good. Back in his office, the cold cases called to him. The Beacon Hill butcher file lay open on his desk, its pages yellowed with age, its leads exhausted decades ago. But his gaze kept drifting to a corner of his corkboard, where a single faded photograph was pinned. It was a picture of a vibrant young woman, her smile wide and carefree, her eyes sparkling with life. It was his sister, Emily, taken years ago, before she vanished without a trace. Her disappearance, the personal cold case that haunted his every waking moment. Her face, frozen in time, was a constant aching reminder of an unresolved sorrow that fueled his relentless pursuit of justice for others. He would often pick up the photo, his thumb tracing her faint smile. He studied every detail, searching for something, anything he might have missed. His gaze always lingered on a seemingly insignificant detail, a delicate silver charm bracelet she wore on her left wrist. It wasn't a typical bracelet. Its charms were oddly shaped, almost abstract, and one in particular, nestled close to her pulse point, caught his eye. It was a tiny, intricate piece of silver, shaped like an abstract bird with a noticeable flaw. One of its wings was bent at an unnatural angle, almost broken. He'd seen it countless times, dismissed it as a quirky, handmade charm. But sometimes, late at night, in the quiet of his office, his mind would return to it, a nagging sense that it held a hidden meaning, a cryptic clue he had never deciphered. It was a ghost of a detail, a whisper from his personal past that subtly informed his dedication to his professional pursuit of the lost and forgotten. This subtle seeding of mystery created a profound sense of curiosity about his own past, connecting his deeply personal loss to the very nature of the cold cases he tirelessly investigated. The rhythmic clatter of keys on Miles Corbin's keyboard, a constant companion in his cold case work, was abruptly silenced by an unscheduled, utterly unwelcome visitor. The precinct lobby, usually a revolving door of hushed complainants and weary officers, gained a new, jarring presence. She was an elderly woman, her silver hair a wild halo around a face etched with countless wrinkles, her clothes a mismatched assortment of faded fabrics. She smelled faintly of mothballs and something indefinably earthy, and her eyes, though bright, darted about with a disconcerting intensity. She introduced herself as Eleanor Vance. "I have visions, Detective," Eleanor announced, her voice a raspy whisper that nonetheless carried an unsettling conviction. "Visions of the past, whispers from the wind, and they speak of the silver spoon case." Miles felt an immediate internal groan. The silver spoon cold case, decades old, unsolvable, and the source of his profound professional frustration. It involved the disappearance of Eleanor Thorne, a prominent Boston socialite whose vanished fortune and vanishing act had haunted the city for 30 years. It was a case that symbolized the very limitations of justice, mirroring the helplessness Miles felt regarding his own sister's disappearance. He had chased countless dead ends, interviewed countless unreliable witnesses, and now, this, a vision. Eleanor's tip was a chaotic stream of seemingly unrelated details, delivered with a bewildering conviction. She wore old lace, the silver spoon did, and betrayal. "I smell it on the wind. Detective. A poisoned rose in a gilded cage, and a bird. Detective. A bird with one broken wing." Her eyes, wide and unblinking, bored into Miles, as if she expected him to immediately comprehend her cryptic pronouncements. Miles, burdened by the endless paperwork of official procedures and weary of the myriad false leads that peppered his cold cases, fought a losing battle against his rising irritation. He looked at Eleanor, seeing only a senile nuisance, another drain on his already scarce time and patience. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice polite but firm. "I appreciate you coming in, but we deal in facts here, not visions. The silver spoon case has been thoroughly investigated, every lead exhausted, but you haven't seen the true picture." Detective Eleanor insisted, her voice rising, her eyes blazing with an almost manic urgency. "It's all connected, like threads in a tapestry. The lace, the rose, the broken wing. It's all there." The broken wing reference sent a subtle, unwelcome shiver down Miles's spine. It triggered a raw, almost superstitious dread within him, subconsciously reminding him of a recurring motif in his own personal cold case, the tiny, flawed bird charm on his sister's bracelet. He saw Eleanor not just as a nuisance, but as a direct threat to his already fragile sanity, a cruel mockery of his dedication, her ramblings poking at the very wound that never healed. He needed her gone. He escorted Eleanor to the front desk, politely but firmly instructing the dispatcher to mark her down as an unreliable source in the official log. Another one for the books. Huh. Miles, his cynical superior, Captain Davis, drawled from his office doorway, a smirk on his face. Davis was a man who valued efficiency over intuition, solvability over justice. He saw cold cases as pointless money pits. Getting a reputation for attracting the city's more colorful characters, Miles simply nodded, his jaw tight. He wanted to dismiss Eleanor entirely, to erase her rambling from his mind. He walked her to the precinct doors, eager to usher her out into the Boston bustle. But just as she stepped onto the sidewalk, she turned, her eyes suddenly clear, piercing through his professional detachment. "Crimson Sunset. Detective," she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady. "Over a hidden dock. That's where the secret lies." Then, she melted into the crowd, leaving Miles standing on the steps, a faint scent of mothballs lingering in the air. The phrase, "Crimson Sunset over a hidden dock," gnawed at him. It was a detail too specific, too oddly poetic for a random delusion. It didn't fit the chaotic stream of her previous ramblings. And it resonated with a buried, seemingly unrelated detail from the Silver Spoon case file he vaguely remembered, a grainy photograph from the original investigation, showing a distant, obscured dock silhouetted against a particularly vivid sunset. He had dismissed it as background noise at the time. Now, a minor, nagging inconsistency awakened a dormant curiosity, a professional instinct that demanded a second look. He shook his head, trying to dislodge it, but the phrase clung to his thoughts like a stubborn burr. The next morning, the nagging detail about the crimson sunset over a hidden dock still prickled at Miles. He had spent a restless night, the phrase echoing in his mind, juxtaposed with the image of his sister's flawed bird charm. He had tried to ignore it, to dismiss it as the ramblings of a senile woman, but the meticulous nature of his own investigative mind demanded a resolution to the incongruity. His internal debate was cut short by a summons from Captain Davis. Miles entered the captain's office to find Davis scowling at a stack of papers. "Corbin," Davis snapped, without looking up. "I've been reviewing the logs from yesterday. Another unreliable source. Really, Miles, you're spending too much time on eccentric citizens and their fantasies. Your caseload is already heavy, and these cold cases are consuming you. They're a drain on resources. And frankly, they're not getting solved." He looked up, his eyes hard. "I'm formally reprimanding you for insubordination and neglect of duty. And consider this a final warning if you continue down this path. If you bring one more loony in here with a vision, I'll have you removed from cold cases entirely. Put you back on petty larceny. Clear." The threat hung in the air, cold and definitive. Miles's jaw tightened. Being removed from cold cases would be a professional death sentence, a final acknowledgement of his inability to bring justice to the forgotten. But even as Davis's words stung, another image, vivid and unsettling, flashed in Miles's mind. It was a memory of his sister's charm bracelet, gleaming in the sun, and that one tiny abstract bird charm, its wing unmistakably bent, almost broken. The broken wing Eleanor had rambled about. The convergence of Captain Davis's threat, Eleanor's dismissed broken wing tip, and his own personal, unresolved grief over Emily's disappearance, solidified something profound within Miles. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was an echo of his own deepest pain. Eleanor, the crazy old woman, held a piece of a puzzle that transcended the Silver Spoon case, that possibly connected to his sister. He knew now that he could not return to merely dismissing Eleanor. He couldn't let his own cynicism, or Captain Davis's bureaucratic pragmatism, blind him to a potential truth, however unconventional. His quiet, ordered life was now undeniably entangled in Eleanor's enigmatic world, a world where madness and profound insight intertwined. He would risk everything, his career, his reputation, to uncover the truth. The long, frustrating pursuit of justice had just taken a sharp, unexpected turn, leading him down a path he never imagined, guided by a voice he had almost ignored. The insistent echo of crimson sunset over a hidden dock haunted Miles Corbin, a persistent whisper against the static of his professional skepticism. Coupled with Captain Davis's threat to reassign him to petty larceny, the dismissed old woman's cryptic phrase had become an inescapable current, pulling Miles away from his structured, logical world. He was desperate enough to chase a ghost if it meant solving the silver spoon case, and perhaps, by extension, finding a shadow of peace regarding his own sister. He had to find Eleanor Vance. He found her living in a cluttered, eccentric apartment in a rundown triple-decker in South Boston, not far from the bustling fish market. The building itself sagged with age, its paint peeling like sunburned skin. Eleanor's apartment was a sensory overload. Stacks of old newspapers, yellowed with time, teetered precariously, alongside piles of what appeared to be antique dolls with missing eyes, and peculiar trinkets: a chipped porcelain bird, a tarnished silver thimble, a faded silk scarf draped over a lampshade. The air was thick with the scent of dust, stale tea, and something indefinably sweet, like dried potpourri. It was the kind of place police usually associated with hoarding, not clairvoyance. "Detective Corbin," Eleanor exclaimed, her eyes, impossibly bright, widening in surprise when she opened her door. She seemed less disheveled than at the precinct, but no less intense. "The wind spoke to you, didn't it? It always does. In time." Miles, suppressing a sigh, forced a calm demeanor. He didn't go seeking a vision. He went seeking answers, driven by pure desperation and that nagging detail. "Ms. Vance," he began, stepping into the chaotic living room. "I'm here about the silver spoon case. You mentioned details." He gestured vaguely at the stacks of papers. "Anything concrete you can share?" Eleanor's gaze sharpened, her earlier ramblings replaced by a disconcerting clarity. She sat down on a worn velvet armchair, gesturing for Miles to take a seat on a rickety wooden stool. "Concrete. Oh, Detective, truth is rarely concrete. It's fluid, like the currents beneath the harbor. But I saw it, clear as day, in the old lace. The betrayal. Eleanor Thorne was trapped. You see, trapped by a man who promised her everything, then took it all." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He was a powerful man, Detective. A gilded cage. He built around her. And the rose. It was poisoned. He wore a signet ring. A snake eating its own tail. He wanted her silence. He wanted her fortune. And he had a hand in her disappearance." Miles listened, his cynicism fighting a losing battle against a growing chill. "Who was he? Ms. Vance. Give me a name." Eleanor's eyes, however, seemed to flicker, as if processing a complex internal image. A man of the people, they called him. But his heart was a dark labyrinth. His hands, they were clean in public, but stained in the shadows. He had a boat, a grand vessel, docked near a forgotten pier, a pier where the sunset always bled crimson. She paused, her gaze fixed on a distant point, as if watching a memory unfold. He called her his red rose. And his name. It coiled like the serpent on his ring. She seemed to struggle, almost physically, to grasp the final piece of information. Thorne. Robert Thorne. Senator Robert Thorne. Miles felt a jolt. Senator Robert Thorne, a prominent, seemingly untouchable local politician, lauded for his community work and impeccable public image. He was a pillar of Boston society. No one, absolutely no one, had ever connected him to Eleanor Thorne's disappearance. The idea was preposterous. But the detail about the gilded cage and a poisoned rose, couched in Eleanor's seemingly nonsensical metaphors, painted a chillingly accurate picture of a controlling, manipulative relationship that had been rumored in hushed tones decades ago, never proven. This was the moment Miles was forced to interpret her madness, and in doing so, he realized the hidden, terrifying truth. Eleanor wasn't crazy. She was a conduit for fragments of deeply buried information. Miles's young, eager partner, Detective Amelia Chen, had arrived moments after Miles, having followed him from the precinct out of a mix of curiosity and concern. Amelia, a sharp, tech-savvy detective in her late 20s, initially dismissed Eleanor as a crank, a byproduct of Miles's obsession with the cold and the bizarre. She leaned against the doorframe, a skeptical smirk playing on her lips, observing the scene with detached amusement. But as Eleanor, with that disconcerting clarity, named Senator Thorne. Amelia's smirk evaporated. She saw the shock register on Miles's face, the subtle widening of his eyes, the clenching of his jaw. She saw the undeniable, chilling precision in Eleanor's otherwise chaotic delivery. Amelia, the pragmatic helper, began to listen. Truly listen. For the first time. "Senator Thorne," Amelia whispered, stepping fully into the room, her skepticism replaced by a dawning incredulity. "That's impossible. Miles. He's untouchable." "Nothing's impossible, Detective," Eleanor chimed in, her eyes twinkling with a strange, knowing light. "Only hidden." Amelia, though still reeling, noticed something else. As Eleanor spoke of hidden docks and coiled serpents, she subtly pointed to various trinkets around the room, a miniature boat figurine, a small, intricate snake charm on a broken necklace. It was as if Eleanor was grounding her abstract visions in tangible objects, offering visual anchors for her cryptic narrative. Amelia, with her sharp technological skills and fresh perspective, began to see the potential patterns, the method in the apparent madness. She pulled out her tablet, a flicker of professional curiosity, now replacing her initial dismissal. "Tell me more about this dock, Miss Vance," she said, her voice unexpectedly gentle. "Any details about the boat or the time of day?" Amelia, the logical mind, was now willing to venture into the unconventional, lending her analytical prowess to Miles's reluctant acceptance of the bizarre. Unbeknownst to Miles and Amelia, Senator Robert Thorne, the powerful and ruthless politician, had long suspected that Eleanor Vance, once a minor person of interest in the original Silver Spoon investigation, possessed incriminating knowledge. He knew Eleanor Thorne, the victim, had been impulsive, prone to confiding secrets. He had carefully monitored Eleanor Vance over the decades, subtly tracking her movements through his extensive network of contacts, maintaining his public image as an unimpeachable public servant. He dismissed her public ramblings as harmless eccentricity, a conveniently crazy person who would never be believed. Upon learning of Detective Miles Corbin's renewed interest in Eleanor through his own deep-rooted, corrupt sources within the Boston Police Department, Senator Thorne felt a surge of cold fury. He knew Miles was tenacious, and that this unlikely alliance posed a direct threat to his carefully constructed life, driven by a desperate need to protect his reputation, his power, and his long-buried secret, the truth of Eleanor Thorne's disappearance and his involvement. Senator Thorne initiated a silent, subtle campaign to discredit Miles. He leveraged his political influence, spreading insidious rumors of Miles's mental instability and reckless obsession with fringe theories within the department. He subtly manipulated internal affairs, planting suggestions for an immediate investigation into Miles's unorthodox methods and his inappropriate association with a known unreliable source. The senator, sitting in his opulent Back Bay office, overlooking the gleaming Boston skyline, believed he was simply neutralizing a minor threat, pulling the strings from the shadows, confident that a disgraced detective and a crazy old woman would never be taken seriously. He was utterly oblivious to the profound dramatic irony the very crazy old woman he sought to silence, and the discredited detective he aimed to destroy were, by their reluctant, unconventional alliance, beginning to unravel his entire carefully constructed facade, bringing his decades-old treachery to light. The crazy old woman was slowly revealing the terrifying truth, stitch by agonizing stitch, a narrative of justice far more complex and compelling than any Miles Corbin had ever encountered. The annual Boston Philanthropic Gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar. It was a shimmering spectacle of opulence, held in the historic grand ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza, a beacon of old-world elegance. Tonight, the air pulsed with the soft murmur of polite conversation, the clinking of crystal glasses, and the distant strains of a live jazz band. Tuxedos and ball gowns glided across polished floors, and the city's elite, its political power brokers and philanthropic titans, mingled under the soft glow of chandeliers. Among them, radiant and seemingly unassailable, was Senator Robert Thorne, the very man Eleanor Vance had implicated. This glittering event, a stage for his unblemished public image, was destined to become the Gauntlet, a clandestine battleground for truth and deception, a place where Miles Corbin, the dismissed detective, would wage a lonely war. Miles, uninvited and utterly out of place, felt every inch an intruder. He was dressed in his best, if somewhat worn, suit, a stark contrast to the custom-tailored silk and wool around him. He moved through the throng like a ghost, his presence largely unnoticed, or, if noticed, dismissed as an eager catering staff or a lost delivery man. He had no badge, no official capacity, no backup within these hallowed halls. He was surrounded by people who viewed him as either an eccentric detective with a damaged reputation or simply an uninvited guest. Amelia, his partner, was operating from outside. A silent guardian in a surveillance van parked discreetly down the street, providing remote support and monitoring communications. But inside, Miles faced Thorne directly, in a hostile, unfamiliar territory where a single misstep could mean the end of his career. And worse, the permanent burial of the silver spoon case. His only weapons were his intellect, his meticulously gathered coded fragments from Eleanor, and an unwavering belief in a truth no one else would accept. The atmosphere was electric, thick with unspoken deals and social maneuvering. Senator Thorne held court near a display of antique jewelry, his charm radiating effortlessly as he shook hands, clapped backs, and delivered practiced, witty remarks. He moved with the ease of a predator in his natural habitat, utterly unaware of the shadow that stalked him. Miles focused, sifting through the visual noise of the gala, searching for the intricate patterns Eleanor had described. He remembered her cryptic words about the gilded cage and the poisoned rose, and her sketches, vague yet chillingly specific, of an antique locket and an oddly shaped floral arrangement. His eyes scanned the room, looking for anything that echoed her visions. Then, across the ballroom, near a prominent display case showcasing a collection of rare, antique timepieces, he saw it. A towering floral arrangement, predominantly made of deep crimson roses, but with one white rose inexplicably positioned at its very center, subtly bent, almost like a poisoned rose. And the arrangement itself was asymmetrical, its branches twisting in a peculiar, almost mathematical design that subtly matched a rough sketch Eleanor had hastily drawn for him. This was the first piece of the puzzle. It pointed, exactly as Eleanor had hinted, to a hidden compartment in the display case nearby, the case holding the rare antique locket, the very one the silver spoon victim, Eleanor Thorne, was last seen wearing. This was the rendezvous point, the prearranged exchange of an incriminating item, perhaps related to the decades-old disappearance. Suddenly, Miles's phone, tucked discreetly in his inner jacket pocket, buzzed. It was Amelia. "Miles, Eleanor just sent another one." Amelia's voice crackled. "Urgent." A voice message. She sounds frantic. She keeps repeating, "The bird cries. The hourglass empties. The truth flies at midnight." And then just static. "I think she's trying to tell you there's an imminent threat. Something happening right now. Related to a key piece of evidence." The message was cryptic, desperate, and filled with a terrifying urgency. The hourglass empties. Time pressure. Miles looked at the ornate clock on the ballroom wall. 11:53 p.m. 7 minutes to midnight. Eleanor's vision was pointing to an immediate, imminent threat to a specific, irreplaceable artifact on display, not just the locket, but another item with a hidden connection to the cold case victim, one that would be critical to linking Thorne to the disappearance. And she was hinting at a secret rendezvous point for Thorne, a prearranged exchange of this incriminating item. Miles felt the crushing weight of the ticking clock. He had mere minutes to decipher this final clue, prevent a theft that would destroy crucial evidence, and expose Thorne, before the night was over and the critical evidence disappeared forever. The jazz music, once a soothing background, now felt like a frantic, mocking rhythm. He saw Senator Thorne, his eyes scanning the room, making his way towards the display case with the floral arrangement. Thorne's movements were subtle, almost imperceptible, a fleeting shift in his demeanor that only Miles's heightened awareness picked up. He wasn't just mingling. He was on a mission. He was going for the locket. Miles had to act. He had no official authority, no power within this opulent setting. He was utterly alone, his reputation hanging by a thread, his career on the brink of collapse. The eyes of the city's elite were upon him, yet none truly saw him. He was a phantom, an anomaly. He had to execute a plan, a risky maneuver, that would retrieve the locket and expose Thorne without drawing immediate suspicion. The stakes were monumental justice for Eleanor Thorne, the possible key to his sister's disappearance, and his own vindication. The clock was ticking, each second amplifying the crushing pressure of the ultimate test. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Copley Plaza pulsed with the deceptive calm of a well-oiled machine. Miles, his heart thundering a frantic rhythm against his ribs, navigated the glittering labyrinth of Boston's elite. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, cut through the polished smiles and clinking glasses, fixed on the subtle details Eleanor Vance had described. He spotted it, the seemingly innocuous floral arrangement near the antique display case, its specific, asymmetrical design, those crimson roses with the single, inexplicably bent white one at its heart, perfectly matched the hurried sketch Eleanor had provided. It pointed, undeniably, to a hidden compartment in the nearby display case, the one holding the rare, antique locket, the very one the silver spoon victim was last seen wearing, and the hidden rendezvous point for Thorne. Miles moved with a calculated, almost predatory grace. He saw Senator Robert Thorne approaching the display, his movements subtle but purposeful, his eyes scanning the periphery with a practiced vigilance. Thorne's hand, a ring with a subtle serpent motif glinting on his finger, began to move towards the hidden compartment. Miles knew he had mere seconds. He whispered into the tiny hidden mic Amelia had planted on him earlier. "Amelia, now. Distraction. Now." Outside, Amelia Chen, perched in her surveillance van, saw Thorne's movement on her monitor. She knew the stakes. With a swift, precise movement, she activated a high-frequency, localized sonic device aimed at a specific point on the building's exterior. A sudden jarring thump echoed through the ballroom, followed by a faint, high-pitched whine. A crystal chandelier above a distant table shivered, a few tiny prisms tinkling to the floor. Startled murmurs rippled through the crowd, drawing attention away from Thorne and the display case. In that fleeting moment of distraction, Miles sprang into action. His hand, quick as a viper, darted to the hidden catch on the display case. It released with a silent click. He replaced the real locket with a meticulously crafted replica Amelia had procured, a perfect match in weight and feel. As he pocketed the original, he felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Thorne's eyes, narrowed in irritation at the disturbance, flickered back to the display case just as Miles withdrew his hand. Thorne reached in, his fingers closing around the replica. A subtle tension, a faint flicker of suspicion, crossed his face as he felt its weight. He sensed something amiss, but dismissed it, attributing it to the sudden noise. Miles met Thorne's gaze, a flicker of triumph, quickly masked in his own eyes. Thorne, oblivious to the swap, simply slipped the replica into his inner jacket pocket, his movements a fraction too deliberate. Breathless moment. As Miles turned to subtly melt back into the crowd, Thorne's eyes, sharper than Miles anticipated, narrowed. Thorne saw the subtle shift in Miles's posture, the almost imperceptible bulge in his inner jacket pocket, the very pocket where the real locket now rested. "Detective Corbin," Thorne purred, his voice dripping with venom, dangerously low. "It seems you've stumbled where you don't belong. This is a private affair." He took a slow, menacing step towards Miles, his hand subtly moving towards his own waist, hinting at a concealed weapon. For a heart-stopping moment, Miles was exposed, alone in the midst of Boston's elite, facing a powerful, ruthless adversary who was now fully aware of his intrusion. It seemed Thorne would silence him, here and now, a discreet disappearance among the privileged. But Miles had prepared. He had anticipated Thorne's ruthlessness. With a calculated risk, a desperate gamble, he subtly activated the small, hidden microphone Amelia had planted on his lapel. The small, almost invisible device began streaming a live audio feed. Simultaneously, Amelia, monitoring the feed from her van, had already established a direct, unscheduled broadcast connection to a major local news outlet that Dr. Alex Carter, through his extensive academic contacts, had discreetly tipped off about Thorne's possible corruption. Thorne continued to advance, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper, unaware of the live feed. "Some secrets, Detective, are best left buried, and some men, they learn the hard way not to dig." His words, laced with veiled threats, were now broadcasting live, not just to Amelia, but to hundreds of thousands of listeners across Boston. Witness reaction. A subtle ripple began to spread through the buzzing gala. Guests, initially oblivious to the silent drama unfolding between the disheveled detective and the impeccable senator, began to look at their phones. Whispers erupted. Then, murmurs turned to gasps as Thorne's voice, amplified by the live feed, resonated from a few stray phones still tuned to the news channel. People began to stare, their faces shifting from confusion to stunned disbelief, then to open shock as they recognized the impeccable senator's menacing tone. Suddenly, the grand ballroom doors burst open. Reporters, alerted by Amelia and Alex, swarmed in, cameras flashing, instantly recognizing the drama. Microphones were thrust forward, aimed at Thorne, whose face, once composed, twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury and dawning horror. He saw the cameras, heard the frantic questions, and realized, with a sickening jolt, that his carefully cultivated image was shattering into a million pieces, broadcast live to the very public he had so meticulously charmed. The gilded cage he'd built for himself, a fortress of lies and reputation, collapsed around him. Police officers, alerted by Amelia and monitoring the news feed, arrived swiftly, their presence a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings. They moved directly towards Thorne, their faces grim. Miles, the dismissed detective, stood tall amidst the chaos. The real locket, Eleanor Thorne's locket, now held aloft for all to see. A silent, undeniable piece of proof. His victory was not just a personal triumph, it was a public vindication, a profound recognition of Eleanor's incredible foresight, and a devastating, resounding victory for justice in a city that had long believed the silver spoon case to be unsolvable. Thorne, trapped in the harsh glare of media lights and the unblinking gaze of the law, could only stammer, his carefully constructed lies unraveling with terrifying speed. The glittering facade of the Boston Philanthropic Gala shattered, giving way to the stark reality of law enforcement. Senator Robert Thorne, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury and dawning horror, was swiftly taken into custody. The live broadcast of his confrontation with Detective Miles Corbin, coupled with the incriminating locket now in police possession, triggered an immediate and widespread investigation. The decades-long mystery of the Silver Spoon cold case, which had haunted Boston for a generation, finally began to unravel. The locket, once a symbol of the victim's elegant life, revealed its dark secrets. Forensic analysis quickly confirmed its connection to Eleanor Thorne's disappearance. Along with hidden compartments containing coded messages and a microscopic chip linking it directly to a shell corporation controlled by Thorne, the police investigation unearthed a systematic cover-up orchestrated by the senator, a web of deceit involving financial embezzlement, blackmail, and ultimately, his direct role in the socialite's disappearance to silence her after she threatened to expose his illicit dealings and their secret affair. The public humiliation of his arrest, splashed across every major news outlet, was immense. Senator Thorne, once an untouchable political titan, now faced multiple charges, including kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. His political career, his meticulously crafted reputation, and his very freedom were utterly destroyed. This Type A villain, driven by greed and a ruthless desire to maintain power, received a just and public downfall, his gilded cage ultimately becoming his prison cell. Back at the Boston Police Department, the atmosphere was thick with a mixture of shock and quiet triumph. The silver spoon case, long considered unsolvable, was finally closed. News of the successful operation reached Principal Davies, who had been tirelessly volunteering at a local community center since her resignation. She watched the news report of Thorne's arrest, a profound sense of remorse washing over her. The next day, she sent a heartfelt public apology to Sarah Albright and Leo Maxwell, acknowledging her grave misjudgment and subtle manipulation by the architect. She took full responsibility for her skepticism, her voice filled with genuine regret for failing to listen. Her dedication to promoting emotional intelligence and critical thinking in education, a path she had bravely chosen, became her quiet form of atonement. Miles Corbin, now hailed as a quiet hero, found himself in a meeting with the Boston Police Commissioner. The commissioner, a no-nonsense veteran, looked at Miles with a rare, genuine smile. "Corbin," he said, his voice gruff but appreciative, "you stuck to your gut when everyone, including me, told you to walk away. You saw what no one else would. That kind of insight, it's invaluable." The commissioner leaned forward. "We're establishing a new unit, a specialized, cold case unconventional insight unit. Its mandate to tackle the cases no one else can solve, the ones that defy conventional methods. And we want you to head it. Miles. Full authority. Dedicated resources. And yes," he added, a twinkle in his eye, "you'll have the freedom to consult with unconventional sources." He paused, then offered a slight nod, implicitly referring to Eleanor Vance. This was not just about a job. It was about validating Miles's entire approach to justice, giving him the resources and the institutional trust to pursue the truth, no matter how obscure or seemingly impossible. It was a chance to finally heal his deep-seated professional wounds, and to channel his intense personal drive into a system that finally respected his unique intuition. Miles, a rare, genuine smile spreading across his face, accepted the challenge, his heart brimming with a newfound purpose. Weeks later, the frantic energy of the investigation had settled into a steady hum of casework. Miles found himself in Eleanor Vance's now slightly less cluttered apartment, a ray of late-afternoon sun illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. They sat across from each other, a freshly brewed pot of Earl Grey tea steaming between them. Eleanor, her eyes bright and clear, took a slow sip. "The wind whispers the truth, Detective," she said, her voice soft but resonant. "It carries the echoes of forgotten moments, the secrets buried beneath layers of time. You just have to know how to listen beyond the noise, beyond the distractions." Miles nodded, a rare, genuine smile on his face, one that reached his eyes and softened the permanent lines of weariness. "And sometimes, Eleanor," he replied, his gaze meeting hers. "The most important voices are the ones everyone else dismisses, the ones considered crazy or unreliable. I almost made that mistake." He thought of Captain Davis and the initial reprimand, the dismissal of Eleanor as a nuisance. How wrong they had all been. Truth has many faces. Detective, Eleanor continued, her hand tracing a pattern on the chipped porcelain teacup. Sometimes it's in a dusty old file, sometimes in the glint of a serpent ring, and sometimes it's in the quiet ramblings of an old woman. She smiled, a knowing twinkle in her bright eyes. They talked for a long time, not just about the silver spoon case, but about the very nature of truth, intuition, and the quiet victory of overlooked wisdom. Miles found himself sharing details about his sister's disappearance, the nagging questions that had haunted him for years, even the cryptic detail of her charm bracelet with the flawed bird. Eleanor listened, her head tilted, her eyes occasionally closing as if sifting through unseen currents. Miles felt a strange, profound sense of peace in her presence, a connection he hadn't known he needed. For the first time in years, the burden of his sister's unsolved case felt a little lighter, no longer a solitary weight, but a shared, elusive puzzle. The dismissed detective and the crazy old woman had found common ground, their unconventional alliance a beacon of hope in the quiet pursuit of justice. 1 year later, the Boston Police Department, once weighed down by its unsolved cold cases, was lauded nationwide for its innovative approach to justice. Its Cold Case Unconventional Insight Unit, spearheaded by Miles Corbin, had become a beacon of hope for grieving families and a testament to the power of overlooked wisdom. Miles, no longer a solitary figure haunted by ghosts, was a respected and fulfilled detective. His unit had solved several previously intractable cases, bringing closure to mysteries that had languished for decades. He worked collaboratively with a diverse network of individuals with unique perceptions, former detectives with uncanny instincts, forensic specialists who saw beyond the obvious, and, crucially, Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, no longer the crazy old woman, was a celebrated, albeit informal, consultant for the unit. Her cryptic insights, once dismissed, were now meticulously analyzed, often providing the crucial missing link that conventional methods had failed to uncover. Miles found a profound sense of peace and purpose. His personal cold case, his sister Emily's disappearance, now actively pursued with new, promising leads, thanks to Eleanor's cryptic insights into a river that flows backward and a silenced melody. His life was no longer burdened by ghosts, but filled with the vibrant pursuit of justice and the camaraderie of those who truly understood and respected his unconventional methods. Recognizing the need to institutionalize this unique approach, Miles established a community outreach program within the Boston Police Department, christened Whispers of Justice. The program actively encouraged citizens, particularly marginalized and overlooked individuals who might possess seemingly insignificant or crazy details about unsolved crimes, to come forward. Miles personally mentored a new generation of young, unconventional detectives, teaching them to value intuition, pattern recognition, and empathy in their investigations. He emphasized that true justice wasn't just about hard evidence, but about listening to the quieter, often dismissed, voices. Every detail matters, he would tell his mentees, his voice resonating with conviction. No lead, however strange, is dismissed without careful, open-minded consideration. The truth often hides in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the obvious. The story ends on a beautiful, clear autumn afternoon in the Boston Public Garden, a serene, vibrant oasis amidst the bustling city. Miles and Eleanor sat on a weathered wooden bench, the golden light of the setting sun dappling through the turning leaves. Eleanor was gently feeding pigeons, her movements soft and rhythmic. One particular pigeon, with a faint, almost healed scar on its wing, landed on her outstretched palm, a subtle, poignant nod to the broken wing motif that had begun their incredible journey. Miles held a small, polished silver charm bracelet, identical to the one his sister Emily had worn. Its charms, once abstract and perplexing, now gleamed with newly discovered meaning, each one a piece of a puzzle he was finally beginning to understand. The small, flawed bird charm, once a symbol of his grief, now represented hope and resilience. He looked at Eleanor, a rare, genuine smile gracing his lips, his eyes twinkling with gratitude. Eleanor met his gaze, her own eyes bright with a shared understanding, a quiet triumph. The city, vibrant and alive around them, extended into the twilight, a testament to the power of unseen connections, overlooked truths, and the quiet, profound victories of justice found in the most unexpected places. Miles, finally, at peace, felt a profound sense of hope for the future, knowing that even the coldest cases could yield to the warmth of truth, whispered from the unlikeliest of sources. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.